This afternoon we're going to talk about GPSs, and there we go, it's mounted. And why GPSs? Well, it's an interesting topic. There we go, the power will come on. In Africa we used GPSs all the time. Everybody I knew, without exception, had a GPS, and we would all use GPSs wherever we went. So we'd plan our trips and pass around the route, the track, the waypoints, and we'd go on these trips together. And having a GPS was just what you did. It was like having a fridge, having a tent. It was a real basic. So I moved to New Zealand 5 years ago, and in those 5 years I haven't met one single person using a GPS. Now that could be for a number of reasons. One of the reasons could be that New Zealand is tiny and you're never really far from anything, so you don't really need a GPS. In Australia it's vast, in Africa it's vast, and you use a GPS. Here everybody seems to only use Google Maps, and it doesn't make sense to me. So everybody uses Google Maps, and I think Google Maps are absolutely, I don't want to say useless, because they'll take you from point A to point B, but they're not what you're really looking for, in my opinion. So the GPS I've got here is my old Garmin 276, and coming to New Zealand I've got a few GPS. I think I've got 4 or 5. I use them all the time, not to navigate around the city. If I'm going to go and I'm looking for John's house in Henderson, I'll use Google Maps. But that's not for off-road. So in the GPS, there's a number of advantages, and then there are a number of reasons why I use a GPS. The first one being that you can enter waypoints. It draws tracks. I can create tracks. I can create routes. I can download everything I've done, and it just works. The other thing that really works nicely is if you purchase a program called Garmap, which comes from Garmin. What's really nice is you load all your maps. You need actually to do that before you can load the maps onto your GPS. So you load the program and you can select the maps that you want to load. I don't load everything. If I'm going to an out of the way place, I'll load those maps. Otherwise I'll load the maps of the region I usually go to. And it's still old technology. I mean, the biggest memory card I've got is 128 megabytes, which was huge at the time. So I go onto Garmap and I plan my trip. So I know where I'm going to go, I know what I want to do, and I start there. So I'll open Garmap on one screen and I'll open Google Earth on the other screen. So while I'm planning my route on Garmap, I'll put in waypoints of where I think I want to possibly sleep, and that will tell me the distance between the points. I can then put in other waypoints and I can direct it to travel via those waypoints, or via a road. So on the Garmap software, I can set it up to do the shortest distance. I can set it up to avoid toll roads. I can set it up for fastest. There's lots of options, but I use it for off-road. So I will plan the rough itinerary of where I want to go each day. I will then enter waypoints and include those in the route, and I can then draw a track. So there's a tool called where you can draw tracks. It's not the easiest tool to use, but I can draw a little track of all the off-road tracks, And when I've finished everything, I load it to my GPS. So on the first day of my trip, I go to my routes or tracks and I say activate, and the GPS will take me from point 1 to point 2 to point 3, and I can change things as I go. So it's just so easy. So I really don't understand why anyone would not have a GPS. They're relatively cheap, and especially in New Zealand, there's a whole bunch of free maps. You don't have to buy maps, and they are compatible with Garmin. So once I've determined the rough route that I want to take, I will then go to Google Earth, and on Google Earth I will have a look if the roads I've chosen are unpaved, if I'm wanting to drive unpaved roads in a certain area. So by looking at Google Earth, I can see that the roads are unpaved. I can then use Street View to have a look at intersections to see if they're gates, if it's private property. And I can do everything on like that on Google Earth. I can also view Garmap. So whatever I do on my Garmin software, I can view in Google Earth. So I work between the two all the time. I check the Street View. I see, are there gates? If there are gates, is it a private place? Is it not? What time do the gates open? What time do the gates close? And you can save lots of time. But it's also part of the trip. In my opinion, the holiday is the journey, not the destination. So once I have I've got to a point where I know where I want to stay, the roads are unpaved, and I've determined all that, I will then go to Google and I will question what is there to do in the area, and I will then go to the local forums, which are probably on Facebook predominantly, and ask questions. Is there a campsite? What are the river crossings like? Are there any nice tracks to explore? Just everything. You ask all the questions. I will then refine my route for each day, and then when I'm really finished, I will load it into my GPS. So yeah, I can't understand why somebody would not use a GPS. I love it. I've got the 276. I started off with a Garmin 3. Then I've got a Garmin 182, which is a really nice big screen. But I've put that on my boat because it couldn't take the vibration, and I had to open it and resolder some of the components. And it's working fine, but I don't want to put it in a vehicle with vibration. I've then got a 196, which is an aviation GPS, but it's got all three modes. So it does aviation, it does marine, and it does land, but it's monochrome. And once you've had color, you don't really want to use monochrome. And I'm not flying anymore, so I don't need the Jefferson database, but it still does routing, and it can tell you how to get from point A to point B. And the one I really use most of the time is the 276 color, but my 276 is really amazing. So I will now show you a little bit more detail, and I'll talk you through what I'm doing. Okay, just briefly, this is the opening screen. So this shows the maps. At the moment I've got the topographical map switched on. So if I zoom in, it'll show me the farms and the boundaries and the swamp low-lying areas, and it'll show me all that. Or I can switch to the street maps, and then I can navigate. I cannot navigate in the topographical maps in this specific set of maps. So that's what we got. If you notice on the right hand side, it's got speed, distance to the next waypoint, the voltage either of the GPS or of the vehicle if it's plugged in, the time to the next point, and the time to my destination. These are all variables and you can select them. So If I go to change data fields, I can select and I can choose sunrise, sunset, time, anything I want. There's probably 30-40 different options. Okay, then if I go to the next screen, it's basically a compass rose. It's more relevant to flying and marine, and you can set it up to give you true north, magnetic north. It gives you your height above sea level. The reason it's all showing 0 is I'm inside and it hasn't logged on yet. It'll give you the maximum speed that you were, and that was when I was flying, so that's what that speed is. Again, it shows you your time to your next waypoint and the time to your destination. This screen is like a 3D follow the road. You would probably only use this if you were driving to Johnny's house down the road. I wouldn't use it for much else. This screen is just a screen computer. There's a whole bunch of options. So this is the one. And if I want to look at page layout, I can set it up as a dashboard like that. I can change it to give me a whole bunch of other fields. You can set it up for what you want. I mean, if you look in this one, it'll give you the distance to the next waypoint, the maximum speed, the trip odometer, the timer, sunrise, sunset, the battery, how much time you've got on the battery, and the power left in the battery. It'll give you all sorts of things. So I'm going to go back to the trip computer, which is the one I like. So you've got your maps. Then if I press menu twice, it gives me all the satellites. So currently it's got 4 satellites. It gives me the coordinates, it gives me the time and the date and all that sort of thing, and it gives me the accuracy. So inside I'm accurate to 23 meters, which is really irrelevant. On the left hand side you've got your routes. So you can set up a route and you can activate a route. Once I've selected the route, I activate it and the GPS will navigate you along that route. You've got 3,000 waypoints. I've used 700, and you can download and upload and save and do whatever, so you don't need to keep them all in. I think the biggest thing is really to select how you're going to save them, and under what icons. All the icons are variable. So if I can show you, to enter a waypoint, I just push enter and I hold enter and it'll come up. So at the moment on the left hand side at the top you'll see it's the number. I can also put a name in there, and next to it's a little tent, so for campsites. But if I look at that, there's a whole variety. Amusement park, ballpark, bicycle trail, cemetery, campsite, forest, geocache, golf course, historic town. I mean, it's endless. And then I can type in a name. It's a very awkward way of doing it, because every letter's got to be selected with an up and down arrow, and then you can have a category, and it gives you all this information. So let me get out of that. You've got 15 tracks. I've currently used 12. A lot of these should really be deleted. They're still my old tracks from South Africa. But so be it. I'll do it when I have a chance. The next thing you've got is your you've got your call list, your logs. I never use this. And then for marine you've got sonar, you've got alarms. The alarms, really the only ones I use on my boat are for anchor drag. So you set it up that if you move more than 50 meters from a central point, it'll beep. Then there's a calendar if you were to need it. It'll give you your celestial information. And then the display you can set up it up that it goes to nighttime, daytime, stay on daytime, stay on nighttime. You can set the brightness, basically anything you want. And then again you've got different alarms, and then your basic setup. So your setup is the the main thing. For your road routing, so if you're driving somewhere, you can, and this is on tar roads, this wouldn't be off-road, you can select it to do fastest time, shortest distance, or off-road. Off-road would generally be a straight line between points, and you've got all these options. Do you want to avoid U-turns, highways, carpool lanes? That's more relevant to America than Africa and New Zealand, but those are the options. Then the main thing here that I would use, you can set up your time to do 12-hour, 24-hour. Your units can be miles, kilometers, or knots, or nautical miles. So that would be your speed and distance. You can set it all up. You can have Fahrenheit or Celsius, meters or feet, and that's all available. Under your location, you can set up your coordinates to be, I use mine in degrees, minutes, and seconds. I've got friends that use degrees, minutes, decimals, or you can have degrees and decimals. The datum is the map datum where you are. So each country has a different map datum. So if you Google where you are, you find out what your map datum is and set it up, and then it will be more accurate. You can set up your welcome message for yourself, and then you've just got your communications ports. So that's it. So on the main screen, I know my satellites, and that's what it's going to be. Back to the maps, that's what I'm using it for. So where I go, I will show you now. So the blue lines that you see are tracks. So those are roads I've driven, and it's drawn a track. And then where you see the arrow at the moment, this area is semi-tidal, not the whole area, but portions of it. So all the little blue lines are places I've driven to, and then I've marked off some waypoints. So no relevance to anything, I just marked the waypoint, and if I zoom in on the waypoint, it's a place where I sometimes camp, or sometimes have a picnic, or whatever. So I've marked it. Also, what's nice is if you're driving in the day, there are obviously things you can see. If you're driving through the dunes at night, it's nice having a track to follow, because you can't see everything, and it's just much easier. So I'll save this track, I'll save the waypoints, and that's what I use it for. And it works for me. And as I said earlier, for me the holiday is the journey, not the destination. And I sit and fiddle and plan and do things. So this is really what I like. If you use a GPS, let me know. If you don't, why don't you give it a bash? I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Cheers.
Like a bird on a tree, I'm just sitting here. I got time, it's clear to see.